How quickly time flies. In just over a year, we have gotten 16 episodes of Star Wars' first live-action show, The Mandalorian. And needless to say, whether or not you are a fan of Star Wars, a fan of Grogu/Baby Yoda, or just not even a fan of either one, that Disney has basically hit a home run with their first live-action show. The Mandalorian is a worldwide phenomenon, Season 1 being nominated for numerous Emmys, and it's just a massive success for Lucasfilm and Disney. And so October 2020 rolled around and we got the second season of The Mandalorian. Now, I've reviewed each individual episode where I go in-depth on non-spoilers and spoilers for most of them, talking about what I liked, what I didn't like about each episode, what it means for the whole series moving forward. So if you'd like to hear some more specific, individualized thoughts, then go check out each one of those reviews. I'll leave the playlist link in the description down below, as well as my review of the entire season as a whole. But in today's episode, we're going to celebrate. We're going to celebrate 16 glorious episodes of The Mandalorian by ranking them all from worst to best. I'm going to be telling you guys what my favorite episodes of The Mandalorian are, going from number 16 to number 1. Keep in mind that these are completely subjective and my own opinions, and yours don't have to match up with mine. That is totally fine. And there are going to be plenty of spoilers, especially for Season 2, so you've been warned. Let's start ranking these episodes. Coming in at number 16 is Chapter 4, The Sanctuary. A lot of people really do like this episode because it harkens back to Seven Samurai and the more traditional roots and inspirations for the original Star Wars. That's great. I certainly recognize how important that is to Star Wars fandom and to Star Wars lore, but just looking at it from an episode, this to me is probably the episode that I would want to rewatch the least. Even when I first saw it, I recognized that it was different and it was a breather. And of course it has some adorable Baby Yoda scenes, but then again, basically every single episode has adorable Baby Yoda scenes, so that doesn't necessarily qualify it to be one of the better episodes. Overall, I think Bryce Dallas Howard did a good job directing the episode. I just happen to not like the story itself. I think that the directing was fine, and the ending with the walkers acting almost like horror creatures and it just feeling different, I think that is a good thing. That's not why I disliked the episode. I disliked the episode because it just felt like an unnecessary pit stop. And pit stops are fine. You're going to see plenty of pit stops in the rest of the episodes of The Mandalorian. The problem is that the pit stops need to at least feel warranted. And again, this is not a bad episode in my opinion. If I had to rewatch it, I would. Which goes to show how great the rest of the episodes are, but not my favorite. Coming in at number 15 is Chapter 5, The Gunslinger. So for many people, this is their least favorite episode. They say this is filler, it's boring, it's poorly directed, poorly written. Here's what I have to say about it. I don't think this is a great episode of The Mandalorian, or just a great episode of television in general. It is filler, it is kind of boring in parts, it is pretty generic. Dave Filoni, a first-time live-action director, he didn't do the best job, but then again, what could you expect from a first-time director in live-action? Totally fine. Then again, I actually had some enjoyment with this episode, because see, for Chapter 4, I didn't enjoy a lot of the episode. I watched it and had a good time in certain parts, but overall I went out of the episode saying, well, that was okay. For this episode, I went out of the episode saying, well, it wasn't my favorite, but I had some fun with it. Yes, that whole bounty hunter apprentice thing, that didn't work out, but Fennec Shand was pretty cool. Tatooine is pretty cool. I get it, nostalgia, but it's still pretty cool. Although, I can't handle Peli Motto. I don't understand what this character is. Coming in at number 14 is Chapter 10, The Passenger. By far and away, my least favorite episode of Season 2 of The Mandalorian. And again, not a terrible episode. At the time when I reviewed it, I said I did enjoy it for what it was. It is fine. It is good. It is entertaining. I think entertaining is the key word, because as you watch this episode as it fits into the larger context of the whole season, you're going to realize, well, it doesn't really have that big of an impact. And also, yeah, Peli Motto's back, but anyways. It's about this frog lady and they get stranded in a cave. So the opening action sequence is one of my favorite scenes in the entire Season 2. It's great. But the rest of the episode is, well, weird. Like I say in the review, it is entertaining. It is certainly fun and enjoyable and even scary at some points. It feels different. Not my favorite episode, though. It's a fun one-off, but when you only have 8 episodes to work with, you really can't afford to have one-offs. Coming in at number 13 is Chapter 2, The Child. This is the first episode where we get to see Baby Yoda really assert himself as Baby Yoda, as he was introduced at the very end of Chapter 1. And so we get to see him use some force powers, be cute, all of that good stuff. Unfortunately, while this episode was expertly directed by Rick Famuyiwa, because again, directing is not a problem for this show for the most part, The story was, well, it was just Jawas and eggs and a mudhorn. It reminded me a lot of Chapter 9 of The Mandalorian, which we'll get to later. But I think that this episode didn't do it quite as well as it did for Chapter 9. And again, it was a bit too short, I think. It felt like a pit stop, and an unnecessary pit stop where the ship crashed, you have to repair it, you get the Jawas, blah, 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 blah. So it just didn't feel that important, and really the only important thing in that episode, in my opinion, was that Baby Yoda revealed his Force powers. That's about it. Coming in at number 12 is Chapter 15, The Believer. Again, this episode, like a lot of the episodes before it, is, well, different. It strangely doesn't rely a lot on action, even though there is a ton of action in the episode. And the action in the episode is good, but it's also kind of unnecessary. Again, another Rick Famuyiwa episode. I like the story a little bit more than the child. I think the action, again, is expertly shot. The scene on the Juggernaut with the pirates is cool, although it sort of seems like a video game, but okay. And then the scene where they bust out the window, that's pretty cool. Slave One, always awesome. And I like how the episode really relies on Pedro Pascal and Bill Burr as the emotional crux of the episode. It felt, though, in the place of an episode 7, the penultimate episode of the season, it felt a little strange to have this as the second to last episode. Like, compared to season 1, where episode 7 was literally a cliffhanger for episode 8, it felt a lot more impactful. This episode felt like, well, say it with me, a pit stop. A very interesting pit stop, which, yes, does set up a lot of good things in episode 8 of season 2, like Pedro Pascal taking the helmet off. But then again, I think maybe I would have liked this episode a lot more if it was placed earlier on in the season. Coming in at number 11 is Chapter 1, The Mandalorian. This was our introduction to Mandalorian, and this episode had to set the tone, and it did that expertly. That is not my complaint with this episode at all. I think that it was so successful in just setting up what this season and this series was going to be. If you watch it, though, and the first time that I saw it, I went, well, this is a little confusing. Is this series supposed to be a continuous serial? Are these episodes supposed to be standalones? Are they supposed to be connecting to each other? It felt interesting. And then with the Baby Yoda reveal, the first time I saw it, I went, oh, what? So this episode is kind of setting up a lot of things, and it has to. It is a pilot. And once you see where those things land, you realize, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. Like Baby Yoda, okay, I get it now. IG-11, I get it now. Kuiil, got it. But that episode as a whole, it's fine. And it's a good pilot, but as an episode as a whole, like I've been saying, it is, well, it's fine. It's good. It's an enjoyable watch. Coming in at number 10 is Chapter 11, The Heiress. What I said in my review, I stand by. Chapter 11, The Heiress feels like a good episode of The Clone Wars. And I thought for sure that Dave Filoni directed this episode. Turns out I was wrong, but again, it felt like just an episode of Clone Wars, and that's not a bad thing. Didn't really feel like an episode of The Mandalorian, though. Din Djarin kind of felt like a side character to Bo-Katan's journey and her story. And again, at this point in the series, I was getting a little sick and tired of the whole, hey, if you do me a favor, I'll give you the information you need. Regardless, the action was fun, the setup was fun, the story is fine, it's good, and again, it's not meant to be a very heavy episode, it's just, we're gonna attack this cruiser, we're gonna get what we need, and yeah, we're gonna get out of here. Great. I did love Bo-Katan, of course, seeing her was great as always, it's just, well, it felt like her episode, not Mando's. Coming in at number 9 is Chapter 6, The Prisoner. Now this episode's interesting because, well, it feels like a side quest, but it's sort of like episode 7 of season 2, ironically both with Bill Burr. And that's what I was saying. If that episode of The Mandalorian, chapter, 15, was not the penultimate episode, I think I would have liked it more. Because the fact is, it's pretty similar to Chapter 6 of The Mandalorian Season 1. It's a prison break episode, and yeah, I enjoyed it. Rick Famuyiwa does an excellent job. He gets to direct his own little standalone episode that works, and I think is great. It has some really tense moments, some good action, and a really fun ending, by the way, with those X-Wings coming in. Overall, it's, well, its own episode. Doesn't really tie into the rest of Season 1. It ties into Season 2, but that's much later. So I'm just judging it based on how entertaining it was, and yeah, it was very entertaining. Coming in at number 8 is Chapter 7, The Reckoning. Now, what brings this episode a little bit down is that it is essentially a part 1. That being said, it is a fantastic part 1 to an epic finale of Season 1. I mean, Kuiil dying at the end, that just broke all of our hearts. And I like the setup. I like them going back to Navarro to meet Greef, the whole betrayal plotline, but he decides, no, I'm not going to do that. We get to see more of Grogu's force powers. It's just setting up this really fun finale. You get to see Moff Gideon for the first time. And again, expertly directed. Deborah Chow did a fantastic job. But it is a part 1, so perhaps not as satisfying as other episodes. Coming in at number 7 is Chapter 9, The Marshal. Now, what separates The Marshal from an episode like Chapter 2, The Child, is that The Marshal is longer. It is nearly an hour long. And again, if you're going to have those standalone episodes, right, with the Krayt Dragon or the Mudhorn, then embrace it. Make it its own standalone episode. What worked really well for Chapter 9 is that it was long and it felt like a mini movie. And I love that. Yes, it is not consequential to the story other than Boba Fett's armor. There is literally nothing else that makes any impact on anything. But I love Timothy Olyphant's Cobb Vanth. And the fact is, it's just a fun story. So if you're feeling like you're watching your own little movie, then it makes it worth it versus a 30-minute episode that has nothing to do with anything, like maybe Chapter 5, The Gunslinger, which sets up something in Season 2 way later. But in Season 1, you're like, well, that was 30 minutes of something. And I think, honestly, making all the episodes of The Mandalorian longer and fleshing out their own individual stories is going to make the episodes and the season a little bit better. Because, again, my problem is with these side quests. If you're going to have side quests, make them worth it. And some of them just don't feel worth it because they feel rushed. They feel short. Coming in at number 6 is Chapter 13, The Jedi. Why so low? This is my favorite episode of the season. I get it. A lot of people love this episode. They think it's their favorite. Awesome. Here's the deal. Maybe this is my fault. This is probably my fault. Maybe if I rewatch the episode again, because I watched it twice. But maybe if I rewatch it again, I'm going to like it even more just because of expectations. Because here's the deal. I went into this episode thinking, well, this isn't the season finale, so I get it. This isn't going to be the end of the show. But this is what the season had been building up to. Ahsoka Tano. We had been building up to this idea that we were going to meet a Jedi. And then in episode 3 of season 2, Bo-Katan says, you're going to meet Ahsoka Tano. This is what the season had been building up to. So to have the episode play out, and yes, Rosario Dawson's Ahsoka Tano is awesome. And I'm so glad she's getting her own series because that is going to be absolutely phenomenal. The Thrawn thing was great. The action was pretty good. The lightsaber fighting is awesome. But to have her go, yeah, so everything led up to me and I'm just going to send you somewhere else. I was like, oh, really? And again, that's probably my fault for having just high expectations of something. But that's how I feel. I felt that this was a missed opportunity to really build up to something. Whether or not you wanted Ahsoka in the show or not is a completely different thing. Because I get it, you wanted the Luke Skywalker thing. That's totally great. But again, you're setting up something and maybe subverting expectations is fine, but what you subverted it to eventually paid off. But the next couple episodes, I was like, yeah, but Ahsoka. Maybe that's just me, though. Coming in at number 5 is Chapter 3, The Sin. This episode was visceral, it was action-packed, it had intrigue, Mando breaking into the Imperial compound, it had emotional stakes too, the Mandalorian, Din Djarin finally figuring out that maybe I don't want to be just this moral compass-less figure. I want to really have my morals rooted in something, and that is this child, that is this baby Yoda. It's giving me character depth, which is great. And the ending action scene is pretty awesome as well, seeing all those Mandalorians come out and fight and defend Din Djarin. This is the way. And overall, this is just a tight, pretty seamless, great episode of The Mandalorian. This is part of the reason why I love this show, is because it's able to continue a great story and hopefully not have filler, because this episode is certainly not filler. It is continuing a story. And it's frustrating because that's what I mean about filler. You could literally skip episode 2 entirely and just go from 1 to 3, and it would actually be basically the same. But anyways, enough of that. Chapter 3 was awesome. Coming in at number 4 is Chapter 14, The Tragedy. I love this episode. It is action-packed, it is story-driven, it is not filler by any means. You get to see Boba Fett and Fennec Shand, and Boba Fett is awesome. It's just a great little episode. It's not long, but it knows exactly what it is. It's 30 minutes of just pure goodness. What prevents it from going to the top? Well, again, it's not very long, and it's just basically action. But the action is awesome. So this episode is awesome. And Boba Fett is awesome. What else can I say? Coming in at number 3 is Chapter 16, The Rescue. Let's get this out of the way right now. The last, 10, 15 minutes of the episode, best Mandalorian anything ever. And I totally get why a lot of people think this is the best episode of the show, because it is phenomenal the way they ended it. And I'm not just talking about Luke Skywalker either, I'm talking about the emotional parts too. That really got to me. At the same time, this is a tale of two episodes, because the first half, while fun, not my favorite. Like I said in my review, when I was watching the first half of the episode, I was actually a little disappointed because I went, well, this is how you're ending The Mandalorian Season 2 after all that build-up? Okay. The second half really picked up, of course, but the first half, it was fine. I equate this episode to something like Avengers Endgame. Avengers Endgame is not my favorite MCU movie. However, the last hour and a half is the best MCU anything ever, period. I just have problems with the first half. It's the exact same thing with this episode. That's why it's not number one, but I still love this episode as a whole. Coming in at number 2 is my favorite episode of Season 2, Chapter 12, The Siege. So yes, this episode is part of that whole side quest thing. But like I said, if you're going to have a side quest, you better make it worth it. You better make it worth it. And this episode was worth it. I love the banter between Greef Karga, Cara Dune, Din Djarin, and even Mythrol. I liked Mythrol in this episode. I love that they're storming this Imperial base, and on top of that, you get to see hints of the lore. You can see snow clones, Dr. Pershing talking about the donor. Some adorable Baby Yoda moments. Just something about this episode as a whole clicked with me. It was consistently good. This was the first time in Season 2 where I really sat up and went, this is the show. This is the show that I've been waiting for. I'm sad it took that long, but we got there, and I'm happy for it. And of course, coming in at number 1 is Chapter 8, the finale of Season 1, Redemption. Now, when I heard Taika Waititi was directing an episode of The Mandalorian, I was a little worried because, yeah, he's a great director. He's an awesome director. But he tends to be a little bit more goofy, and I wasn't entirely sure how that would fit into Star Wars. Well, all of my fears gone. I am so sold on the idea of him directing a Star Wars movie now because of this episode, and I have no doubt that that's exactly why they tapped him to direct a Star Wars movie, because this episode is awesome. This is how you wrap up a season, with the entire episode. Again, what gives this episode the edge over the finale of Season 2 is because it's consistent. From beginning to end, with the Stormtrooper banter and Baby Yoda, with IG-11 coming into Navarro, with Moff Gideon the TIE Fighter, with Din Djarin taking off his helmet, with Baby Yoda using his force powers in the lava, IG-11 self-destructing, the Darksaber. This is how you end a season. And to this day, it is still consistently my favorite episode of The Mandalorian thus far. So, what is your favorite episode of The Mandalorian? Again, all of these episodes are great. Even my least favorites, I still contend are good episodes. And I can't wait because it doesn't look like the creative team is letting up anytime soon. They got the Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka Tano, Rangers in the Republic, of course, Mando Season 3. I can't wait for all the Star Wars content coming up. So again, what did you guys think of my ranking? And let me know your ranking in the comments down below. While you're at it, please make sure to subscribe and give this video a like. And if you want to check out some more videos, check out the videos on the screen right now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.